My name is Olivia Sanders, and I'm 23 years old. The constant throb in my knee has become my unwelcome companion since my senior year volleyball injury. My parents called my surgery too expensive despite the doctor's warnings. Then last month, they surprised my sister Madison with a brand new BMW worth $65,000. The betrayal cut deeper than the pain in my deteriorating knee. But my grandfather Samuel has always seen me clearly when my parents looked right through me. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt the sting of family favoritism. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. While other kids spent weekends at sleepovers or hanging out at the mall, I was busy maintaining my 4.0 GPA, practicing volleyball until my muscles screamed, and helping around the house. My parents, Robert and Diana Sanders, set high expectations, and I worked tirelessly to meet them. Volleyball wasn't just a sport for me, it was my ticket to freedom. I dreamed of earning an athletic scholarship that would take me far from our small Connecticut town. During practice, when my feet left the ground for a spike, those few seconds of flight felt like pure possibility. Coach Wilson said I had real potential, and college scouts were starting to notice. Then there was Madison, my sister, younger by 4 years and different from me in every way. Where I was dedicated and disciplined, Madison flitted between interests like a hummingbird between flowers. One month it was painting, the next piano lessons, none lasting longer than her fleeting enthusiasm. Yet somehow, each new passion warranted expensive equipment or private tutoring that my parents readily provided. Madison is finding herself, Mom would explain when I questioned the double standard. Not everyone knows their path as early as you did, Olivia. But the truth was stark and simple. Madison was the favorite. The golden child. The baby who could do no wrong. When I needed new volleyball shoes, Mom suggested I babysit to earn the money. When Madison wanted a $400 prom dress, it appeared in her closet within days. When I earned academic honors, there were nods of approval. When Madison barely passed algebra, there was a celebration dinner at an expensive restaurant for trying her best. Only Grandpa Samuel seemed to notice the disparity. Dad's father, a retired judge with kind eyes and a spine of steel, lived an hour away but visited often enough to see the pattern. "You're something special, kiddo," he told me one afternoon after watching my volleyball tournament. We sat on his porch, drinking lemonade as the summer sun dipped toward the horizon. "Don't ever let anyone dim your light." He was the one who drove 3 hours to pick me up when I missed the bus home from a debate competition. He remembered every achievement without being reminded. When I graduated as valedictorian, it was his proud tears that meant the most. Everything changed during the state semifinals my senior year. We were down by 2 points in the final set. The ball came my way, and I leaped higher than ever before, determined to score. The spike was perfect, earning us the point, but my landing wasn't. My right knee twisted unnaturally beneath me. The sound it made, a sickening pop, still haunts my dreams. The team doctor rushed onto the court as white-hot pain shot through my leg. "Possible ACL tear," he murmured to the coach. "She needs to get to a hospital." My parents were in the stands, but it was my best friend Taylor who rode in the ambulance with me, holding my hand through every jolt and bump. "Your parents are following in their car," the paramedic assured me. "They'll meet you at the hospital." They did, eventually, 2 hours later. Madison had been hungry, so they stopped for dinner first. The diagnosis came the next day: complete ACL tear, severe meniscus damage, and a tibial plateau fracture. The orthopedic specialist, Dr. Patel, didn't sugarcoat it. "Without surgery, you're looking at chronic pain, limited mobility, and early-onset arthritis," she explained, showing me the MRI images. "With proper surgical intervention and physical therapy, you could regain most, if not all, functionality." Hope flickered. Surgery meant a chance to walk without pain, to maybe even play recreationally one day. But that hope dimmed when I saw my parents exchange that look, the one that passed between them whenever Madison wanted something expensive. The difference was, this wasn't a want. This was a need. I tried to push through. Started college on a partial academic scholarship at State University, limping across campus, wincing up staircases, swallowing pain relievers like candy. Taylor, who chose the same university, watched me struggle with growing concern. "This isn't right, Liv," she said one night, finding me crying in our shared bathroom after a particularly painful day. "You need that surgery. Your parents should be helping you." But asking for help meant admitting weakness, and in the Sanders family, weakness was an unforgivable sin. At least for me. 3 months into my freshman year, the pain became unbearable. Dr. Patel's warning echoed in my mind. Without surgery, permanent damage was inevitable. I'd been taking maximum doses of over-the-counter pain medications, wearing a bulky brace, and still, simple tasks like climbing the 3 flights to my American literature class left me breathless and teary. One Sunday evening, I sat on my dorm room bed, surrounded by textbooks and a half-finished essay. My knee throbbed in angry protest of the day's activities. I reached for my phone and stared at my parents' contact information, my thumb hovering over the call button. "You can do this," I whispered to myself. "Just ask them." Taylor walked in with 2 cups of coffee and immediately read my expression. "Calling the parents?" I nodded, swallowing hard. "I can't keep living like this. Want me to leave?" "No," I said quickly. "Please stay." Taylor gave my shoulder a supportive squeeze and sat beside me as I pressed call and put the phone on speaker. Mom answered on the 4th ring. "Olivia? Is everything okay? It's almost 9. "Hi, Mom. I need to talk to you and Dad about something important." There was shuffling on the other end. Then Dad's voice joined in. "What's going on? Are your grades slipping?" Of course, that would be his first concern. "No, Dad. I have all A's. It's about my knee. It's getting worse." Dr. Patel was right. I need the surgery. Silence stretched across the line, taut and uncomfortable. "Honey," Mom finally said, her voice softening in that way that always preceded bad news. "We discussed this. Those kinds of specialized surgeries are so expensive." "I know, but insurance would cover part of it," I pressed. "And Dr. Patel says if I wait too long, the damage might be irreversible." Dad cleared his throat. "Do you have any idea what medical procedures cost these days?" "We're talking tens of thousands of dollars, Olivia. We can't just throw that kind of money around." My fingers tightened around the phone. "I'm not asking you to throw money around. I'm asking for help with a necessary medical procedure. Have you looked into alternative treatments?" Mom suggested. "Your cousin Beth had good results with that acupuncturist for her back pain." Taylor's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "This isn't back pain, Mom. My ACL is completely torn. No amount of acupuncture is going to fix that." "Don't take that tone," Dad warned. "We're trying to help." "Are you?" The words escaped before I could stop them. Another heavy silence. "Look," Dad said eventually, his businessman voice taking over. "Why don't you get a better job? Something that pays more than that coffee shop. Start saving up. Maybe by next year. Next year. By then, I might not be able to walk without assistance. I'm already working 20 hours a week on top of a full course load," I reminded them. "The surgery costs $45,000 with our insurance. How am I supposed to save that kind of money?" "We all have to make sacrifices," Olivia, Mom said, her voice suddenly distant. "Your father and I worked hard for everything we have." The conversation continued in circles until I couldn't take it anymore. I thanked them for their time and ended the call, dropping my phone onto the bed as if it had burned me. Taylor wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "I can't believe them." I couldn't either, but part of me wasn't surprised. This was just another verse in a song I'd been hearing my whole life. Madison's needs were necessities, mine were inconveniences. The next few weeks became increasingly difficult. Stairs were my enemy. The 10-minute walk across campus stretched to 20, then 30 as I had to stop frequently to rest. I started leaving for class 30 minutes early just to ensure I'd arrive on time. One afternoon, I found myself unable to stand after sitting through a 2-hour lecture. Taylor had to help me up, the other students staring as I bit my lip to keep from crying out. "This is ridiculous," Taylor muttered as she helped me limp outside. "Call your grandfather." I shook my head. "I can't ask him for that kind of money." "You're not asking. You're telling him what's happening. He deserves to know, and your parents obviously aren't telling him." She was right. That evening, I called Grandpa Samuel. "Livy," he answered warmly. "What a wonderful surprise. How's my favorite scholar?" The familiar nickname broke something inside me. "Not great, Grandpa." His tone immediately shifted. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" I explained everything. The continuing pain, the doctor's warnings, my parents' refusal to help. He listened without interrupting, though I could hear his breathing grow heavier with each detail. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked when I finished. "I didn't want to worry you. And I didn't want to put you in the middle of things with Dad." "You let me worry about your father," he said firmly. "Now, have you scheduled a follow-up with your doctor? I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." The "we" nearly made me cry. Meanwhile, I tried to find ways to earn extra money. I picked up additional shifts at the campus coffee shop, despite the agony of standing for hours. I offered tutoring services, joined a medical study that paid participants, and even donated plasma twice a month. My small savings grew painfully slowly. At this rate, I'd have enough for surgery sometime in my 30s, long after the damage became permanent. Madison called occasionally, chattering about her freshman year at Westfield College, the private university our parents had happily paid for despite her mediocre grades. She never asked about my knee, though she knew about the injury. When I mentioned the pain once, she quickly changed the subject to her new boyfriend or the sorority she was pledging. "You wouldn't believe the parties here, Liv," she gushed during one call. "College is so amazing." I looked down at the ice pack on my knee, the bottle of ibuprofen on my nightstand, and the stack of medical bills I was slowly chipping away at. "Yeah," I replied hollowly. "Amazing." Winter break arrived with a blanket of snow and the promise of 3 weeks away from campus stairs and long walks between buildings. I drove my 8-year-old Honda back home, wincing every time I had to press the clutch with my bad knee. The Sanders family home looked like a holiday card, white lights outlining the roof and windows, a wreath on the glossy red door. Mom had always gone all out for Christmas, especially for Madison, who still received presents from Santa despite being 19 years old. I parked on the street since the driveway was full, Mom's SUV, Dad's sedan, and Grandpa Samuel's trusty old pickup truck. He must have come for dinner, which instantly lifted my spirits. At least I'd have one ally at the table. Madison flung open the front door before I could knock. "Olivia. Finally. You're missing all the excitement." She looked radiant, her cheeks flushed with anticipation, bouncing on her toes like she used to do on Christmas mornings as a child. "What excitement?" I asked, dragging my suitcase up the porch steps with a grimace. "You'll see. Mom and Dad have the biggest surprise ever. They made me wait until you got here to reveal it. That was unexpected." Usually, Madison wouldn't delay gratification for anything, least of all my arrival. Inside, the house smelled of pine and cinnamon. Mom was arranging appetizers on the dining room table while Dad and Grandpa Samuel sat in the living room, an obvious tension between them. "Olivia's here," Madison announced unnecessarily. "Can we do it now? Please?" Mom smiled indulgently. "Let your sister get settled first, sweetie." "It's fine," I said, curious despite myself. "What's going on?" Dad stood up, clapping his hands together with theatrical enthusiasm. "Well, since we're all here, I guess now's as good a time as any. Everyone grab your coats. We have something to show Madison." "Not us. Madison." We filed outside, Madison practically vibrating with excitement. Dad led us down the driveway toward the street, then dramatically pulled a small remote from his pocket and pressed a button. The garage door began to rise. Inside, gleaming under the overhead lights, sat a brand new BMW sedan, complete with an enormous red bow on the hood. "Surprise!" Mom and Dad shouted in unison. Madison screamed, jumping up and down. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Is this for real? Is this mine?" "All yours, princess," Dad confirmed, dangling the keys. "You mentioned wanting something safer than the Civic, and well, your mother and I agree that our baby girl deserves the best." Madison snatched the keys and ran to the car, running her hands reverently over its sleek blue surface. "It's the exact model I wanted." "How did you know?" "You left the browser open on the family computer," Mom laughed. Subtle hint taken. I stood frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. The cold air seemed to crystallize in my lungs. Beside me, Grandpa Samuel had gone very still. "What model is it?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "BMW 3 Series," Dad answered proudly. "Top safety ratings, great fuel economy for its class, and all the latest technology." "And the cost?" Grandpa pressed. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Well, we got a good deal. Year-end clearance and all that." "Robert," Grandpa's tone sharpened. "How much?" "Base price is $55,000, Dad admitted. With the premium package and extended warranty, it came to around $65,000. $65,000. $20,000 more than my knee surgery. The world tilted sideways. I grabbed the garage door frame to steady myself, but it wasn't just physical imbalance threatening to topple me. It was the sheer weight of the revelation. My parents had $65,000 for Madison's want but nothing for my medical need. "Congratulations, Madison," I managed to say, the words tasting like ash. "That's quite a gift." Madison barely looked at me, too busy exploring the car's interior. "The leather seats are heated. And look at the sound system." Mom must have noticed something in my expression because she came over and placed a hand on my arm. "Isn't it wonderful? Madison's been through so much this semester, adjusting to college and all. We thought she deserved something special." Something inside me snapped. "Something special," I repeated slowly. "Like being able to walk without pain? Like not developing arthritis in my 20s? Mom's smile faltered. "Olivia, don't start. This is Madison's moment. 2 months ago, I begged you for help with a surgery that costs $45,000. A necessary medical procedure. You said you couldn't afford it." The garage went quiet except for the soft beeping of Madison testing various buttons on the dashboard. "That's different," Dad said stiffly. "How?" I demanded, my voice rising. "How is it different?" "Don't make a scene," Mom hissed, glancing nervously at Madison, who had finally tuned into the tension. "A scene? You want to talk about scenes? How about the scene where I collapse in class because I can't take the pain anymore? Or the scene where my doctor tells me I'll need a knee replacement before I'm 30 because the damage has become irreversible?" Dad stepped forward, his face darkening. "That's enough, Olivia. We make the financial decisions in this family, and we decided a safe, reliable car for your sister was a priority. A BMW isn't about safety. It's about status. You could have bought her a Toyota with 5-star safety ratings for $20,000 and put the rest toward my surgery." "The surgery might not even work," Mom interjected. "Dr. Patel said herself there are no guarantees." I stared at her in disbelief. "She said the success rate is over 90% for someone my age. Those are better odds than Madison even graduating college, statistically speaking." "Hey," Madison protested from inside her new car. Grandpa Samuel placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "I think we should continue this discussion inside," he suggested quietly. But I was beyond reason. Months of pain and disappointment crystallized into a clarity I'd never experienced before. "When exactly did you buy this car?" I asked. My parents exchanged glances. "Last month," Dad finally admitted. "We wanted to wait until Christmas to surprise her." "Last month," I repeated. Right after you told me you couldn't afford my surgery. The silence confirmed everything. I turned and limped back into the house, grabbed my suitcase from the entryway where I'd left it, and headed for the door. Olivia, don't be dramatic, Mom called after me. Where are you going? Back to my apartment, I said without turning around. But you just got here. It's Christmas break. I'd rather be alone than be where I'm clearly not valued. Dad's footsteps followed me. Now wait just a minute, young lady. You don't get to speak to us that way. I whirled around, ignoring the stabbing pain the sudden movement sent through my knee. You chose a luxury car over your daughter's health and future. I think I'm entitled to a few harsh words. I left before they could respond, throwing my suitcase into my old Honda and driving away from the house I'd grown up in, tears blurring the road ahead. Back at my nearly empty campus apartment, I called Taylor, who was visiting her parents in Ohio. They bought her a BMW, I said when she answered, not bothering with hello. $65,000 for a car when they told me they couldn't afford $45,000 for my surgery. Taylor was silent for a moment. Holy shit, Liv. I don't even have words. Neither did I. Just a hollow ache that had nothing to do with my knee. Later that night, I overheard a conversation through the thin walls separating our kitchen from our neighbors. My parents had called them, apparently worried when I hadn't answered their calls. She's fine, Mrs. Sanders, my neighbor Rachel assured them. I just saw her getting some ice from the freezer. A pause as she listened. Well, maybe she needs some space. No, I understand you're concerned. Yes, I'll tell her you called. Again. After Rachel hung up, she knocked softly on my bedroom door. Your mom called. She sounds pretty upset. Thanks for letting me know, I replied flatly. She mentioned something about family finances being tight after some big purchase. Said they might not be able to send your usual allowance this month. I laughed bitterly. Of course they can't. The irony was almost too perfect. They spend a small fortune on Madison's dream car, then claim financial hardship when it comes to supporting me. The pattern was so familiar it almost felt like comfort in its predictability. That night, lying in bed with an ice pack on my knee, I made a decision. I would stop expecting my parents to treat me fairly. I would stop hoping they would suddenly see me as they saw Madison. I would focus only on what I could control, my education, my health, and my future, whatever limited version of it might now be possible. I just didn't realize how quickly that future would come crashing down around me. By February, walking had become an exercise in endurance. Each step sent lightning bolts of pain from my knee up through my thigh and down to my ankle. The campus disability services provided me with a temporary parking permit that allowed me to drive between buildings, but even that small mercy couldn't offset the deterioration happening inside my joint. Dr. Patel's face was grim when I visited her office for a follow-up. She manipulated my knee gently, noting my winces and sharp intakes of breath. The instability has worsened, she said, helping me sit up on the examination table. I'm ordering a new MRI, but I can already tell you what it's going to show. More damage, I supplied dully. She nodded. The torn ACL is allowing your knee to move in ways it shouldn't. This is causing progressive damage to the cartilage and meniscus. Additionally, the tibial plateau fracture hasn't healed properly without surgical intervention. What does that mean for me? Long-term. Dr. Patel sat down, meeting my eyes directly. Without surgery, and soon, you're looking at chronic, debilitating pain. Limited mobility that will worsen over time. Probable knee replacement surgery by 30, possibly earlier. And even with a replacement, you'll never have the same function you could have had with timely ACL reconstruction. I swallowed hard. And with surgery? If we operate soon, we can still salvage a good outcome. Not perfect, the window for optimal results has passed, but good. You could lead a normal, active life with minimal limitations. How soon is soon? Ideally, within the next month. I closed my eyes, doing mental calculations. My savings stood at just under $8,000. Not even a fifth of what I needed. I'll figure something out, I told her, not believing it myself. When the new MRI results came back, they confirmed everything Dr. Patel had predicted and revealed additional bone spurs forming where they shouldn't. The clock wasn't just ticking, it was racing toward a finish line I couldn't possibly reach in time. Desperate to accelerate my savings, I took on more hours at the coffee shop, despite Taylor's increasingly vocal concerns. You can barely stand for 20 minutes, Liv. How are you going to manage an 8-hour shift? I don't have a choice, I replied, swallowing 2 pain pills with my morning coffee. The manager, Keith, was sympathetic but firm. I need someone who can move quickly during rush periods. Are you sure you're up for this? Absolutely, I lied. I'm managing the pain much better now. That was far from true. The pain had become a living thing, a monster that grew hungrier and more demanding each day. It woke me at night, accompanied me to classes, and colored every interaction with its persistent presence. 3 weeks after increasing my hours, the inevitable happened. It was the afternoon rush, the cafe packed with students seeking caffeine before evening classes. I'd been on my feet for 6 straight hours, ignoring the warning signals my body was frantically sending. I was carrying a tray of clean mugs from the dishwasher when my knee simply gave out. No warning, no gradual buckling, just a sudden, complete failure. The tray crashed to the floor, mugs shattering across the tile, and I followed, collapsing in a heap amid the broken ceramic. The pain was indescribable. White-hot agony radiated from my knee, stealing my breath, vision narrowing to a pinpoint. Someone was screaming. It took several seconds to realize it was me. Keith was beside me instantly. Don't move, Olivia. Someone call an ambulance. No ambulance, I gasped. Can't afford it. But Keith was already on the phone with 911, describing the situation. Around us, customers stood in shocked silence or hurried to clear space. Taylor, who had been studying in the corner, pushed through the crowd. Liv. Oh my God. The paramedics arrived quickly, their efficient movements and calm questions creating a center of order in the chaos. They strapped me to a backboard despite my continued protests about the cost. Your knee's completely unstable, one explained gently. Moving you without proper support could cause additional damage. The ride to the hospital passed in a blur of pain and fear. Taylor followed in her car after calling my parents. They're on their way, she told me in the emergency room as doctors ordered x-rays and administered painkillers. Should be here in a few hours. The orthopedic surgeon on call, Dr. Mercer, didn't waste time with platitudes after reviewing my scans. The damage is extensive, he told me, pointing to areas on the x-ray. The knee gave out because the ACL is completely non-functional and there's significant additional tearing in the meniscus. You need surgery, and you needed it months ago. I know, I whispered, the painkillers making my tongue feel thick. Can't afford it. Dr. Mercer frowned. This isn't elective cosmetic surgery we're talking about. This is necessary treatment to prevent permanent disability. Before I could respond, my parents burst into the treatment area, Mom's face pale with worry, Dad looking irritated at the inconvenience. Olivia. Mom rushed to my side. What happened? Are you okay? Her knee collapsed, Taylor explained when I didn't immediately answer. The doctor says she needs surgery right away. Dad stepped forward. What kind of surgery are we talking about? What's the prognosis? Dr. Mercer explained the situation again, emphasizing the urgency. Without surgical intervention immediately, your daughter faces a future of chronic pain and limited mobility. Even with surgery, the prolonged delay means she may never regain full function. And the cost? Dad asked, his expression already closing off. Your insurance should cover a significant portion. The hospital financial services can discuss the details with you. Mom squeezed my hand. We'll figure something out, honey. But I saw the look she exchanged with Dad, the same one from months ago when Dr. Patel first recommended surgery. Nothing had changed. Don't bother, I said, the words slurring slightly from the medication. I know where I stand in the family budget. Dad's face hardened. This isn't the time or place, Olivia. When is the time? After I'm permanently disabled? After I've dropped out of college because I can't physically make it to class. A nurse entered, interrupting the brewing argument. We're admitting you overnight for pain management and to monitor for any secondary issues. The orderly will be here soon to take you to your room. As if on cue, Madison appeared in the doorway, still wearing her coat, car keys dangling from her finger. I got here as fast as I could, she announced. The parking in this place is awful. I had to park like a mile away. She approached the bed, finally seeming to notice the gravity of the situation. Whoa, Liv, you look terrible. What happened? Before anyone could answer, she continued, and why is everyone looking so serious? It's just anything, right? Like when you fell during that volleyball game. The casual dismissal of the injury that had dominated my life for over a year was the final straw. It's not just a knee thing, Madison, I snapped. It's an injury that's getting worse because Mom and Dad decided your BMW was more important than my ability to walk without pain. Madison's eyes widened. That's not fair. I didn't ask them to buy me the car instead of paying for your surgery. Didn't you? Because I distinctly remember you showing Mom and Dad BMW brochures right after they told me they couldn't afford my surgery. I didn't know about that. Madison protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. You knew, I insisted. You've always known. You just didn't care because you always get what you want. That's enough, Dad interrupted. Madison, go wait in the hallway. Your mother and I need to speak with the doctor. But I just got here, Madison complained. And I drove all the way from Westfield. In your brand new BMW, I added bitingly. Must have been such a hardship. Madison stormed out, her face flushed with anger or embarrassment. I couldn't tell which. The nurse who had been adjusting my fore looked uncomfortable. I'll give you folks some privacy, she murmured, but not before giving my parents a look that clearly communicated her opinion of the family dynamics she'd witnessed. Once we were alone with Dr. Mercer, Dad shifted into negotiation mode. What are our options here? Is there anything less invasive we could try first? Dr. Mercer's professional demeanor didn't slip, but his voice took on an edge. Mr. Sanders, your daughter has already exhausted all conservative treatment options. She's been dealing with this injury for over a year without proper intervention. The window for optimal recovery is closing rapidly. But surely there must be alternatives to immediate surgery, Mom suggested, her hand still clutching mine in a grip that felt more restraining than comforting. I pulled my hand away. There aren't. I've researched everything. I've tried everything I could afford. This is happening because you chose not to help me when it would have made a difference. The painkillers were making me bold, loosening the restraints I'd always placed on my resentment. We didn't have that kind of money then, Dad insisted, but the lie sounded hollow even to him. But you had $65,000 for a luxury car? I challenged. Make it make sense, Dad. Explain to me how that math works. He had no answer. As they wheeled me to my hospital room, leaving my parents to deal with admission paperwork, I felt oddly detached from the situation. The physical pain was temporarily muted by medication, but the emotional wound was raw and gaping. Taylor stayed with me, sitting beside the hospital bed in uncomfortable silence. I'm calling your grandfather, she finally said, reaching for her phone. This time, I didn't object. Grandpa Samuel arrived at the hospital just after dawn the next morning. I woke to find him sitting in the chair beside my bed, his weathered hands clasped together, eyes fixed on my face with an intensity that suggested he'd been watching me sleep for some time. Grandpa, I whispered, throat dry from sleep and medication. You didn't have to come. There's nowhere else I should be, he replied simply, reaching for the water pitcher on the bedside table and pouring me a cup. Taylor called me last night. Told me everything. I took a sip of water, grateful for its coolness. I didn't want to worry you. Family worries about family, he said, a strange emphasis on the word family that I couldn't quite interpret. That's how it's supposed to work, anyway. A nurse came in to check my vitals and adjust my pain medication. After she left, Grandpa moved his chair closer. "I want you to tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning. No editing to spare my feelings or your father's reputation. I need to know exactly what's been happening." So I did. I told him about the initial injury, the doctor's recommendations, my parents' refusal to help financially. I described the increasing pain, the failed attempts to save enough money, and finally, the devastating discovery of Madison's new car. Grandpa Samuel listened without interrupting, his expression growing more grave with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I knew your father favored Madison," he finally said. "I've spoken to him about it many times over the years. But this," he shook his head, a muscle working in his jaw, "this crosses a line I didn't think even Robert would cross." He stood up suddenly, straightening to his full height. Despite being in his 70s, Grandpa Samuel was still an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered with the commanding presence of the judge he once was. "I'm going to make one call," he said, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of steel that sent a shiver down my spine. "Then we're going to fix this." He stepped out into the hallway, phone already in hand. Through the partially open door, I could hear the low rumble of his voice, though not the words. The call was brief, but seemed to accomplish whatever he intended, because when he returned, there was a grim satisfaction in his eyes. "Your parents will be here within the hour," he informed me. "I've also asked Dr. Mercer to join us. I want to hear the medical situation directly from him, with everyone present." True to his word, my parents arrived 45 minutes later. They entered the room cautiously, as if approaching a trap they suspected but couldn't avoid. "Dad," my father acknowledged Grandpa stiffly. "Olivia, how are you feeling this morning?" "About the same," I answered truthfully. Mom hovered near the foot of the bed, uncertainty written across her features. "Did you sleep okay? Hospital beds are so uncomfortable." Before I could respond, Grandpa Samuel cut in. "Let's skip the small talk. We're here to discuss Olivia's medical needs and how they're going to be addressed." Dad bristled at the directive. "Dad, with all due respect, this is between us and Olivia." "No," Grandpa replied evenly. "It stopped being just between you when you abdicated your parental responsibility to ensure your child's health and well-being." The tension in the room thickened. I'd never heard Grandpa speak to my father this way, with such barely contained anger. A knock at the door interrupted the standoff. Dr. Mercer entered, carrying my chart and looking professionally neutral despite the obvious tension. "Good morning," he greeted everyone. "I understand we're having a family conference about Olivia's treatment plan." "Yes," Grandpa Samuel took charge immediately. "Doctor, could you please explain once more, for everyone's benefit, exactly what Olivia's medical situation is and what treatment she requires?" Dr. Mercer nodded and proceeded to outline my condition in clear, unambiguous terms, the extent of the damage, the necessity of surgical intervention, the consequences of further delay, and the expected outcomes with proper treatment. "And the approximate cost?" Grandpa prompted when the doctor finished. "With insurance, the patient responsibility would be approximately $45,000, covering the surgery itself, hospital stay, anesthesia, and initial physical therapy." "Thank you, doctor," Grandpa said. "Now, one more question. In your professional opinion, is this surgery medically necessary, or is it elective?" "It is absolutely medically necessary," Dr. Mercer stated without hesitation. "Without this surgery, Olivia faces a future of chronic pain, progressive mobility limitations, and probable disability." Grandpa nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. "Thank you for your clarity. I have just one more request. Could you give us some privacy for a family discussion? We'll call if we need anything further." Once Dr. Mercer left, Grandpa turned to my parents, his expression hardening. "I'm paying for the surgery." Dad started to protest, but Grandpa held up a hand. silencing him. I'm not finished. I'm paying for it because apparently my son and daughter-in-law believe a luxury car for their younger daughter is more important than necessary medical care for their older daughter. That's not fair, Mom objected weakly. Isn't it? Grandpa challenged. Tell me, Diana, how much do you and Robert have in your savings account right now? My parents exchanged alarmed glances. That's private information, Dad said stiffly. Not anymore, Grandpa replied. Not when you're claiming financial hardship as a reason to deny your daughter necessary medical care. We never said we were experiencing hardship, Dad protested. No? Then what would you call it when you tell Olivia you can't afford her $45,000 surgery, but then spend $65,000 on a car for Madison the very next month? Silence filled the room. How did you know how much we have in savings? Mom finally asked, her voice small. Grandpa's expression was unyielding. I called your financial advisor this morning. You had no right. Dad exclaimed. No right. Grandpa's voice rose slightly. I have every right when it comes to protecting my granddaughter. Martin has been my friend for 30 years. When I explained the situation, he was as appalled as I am. He turned to me. Your parents currently have $182,000 in their main savings account. They have another $75,000 in a separate account earmarked specifically for Madison's future wedding. They could have paid for your surgery 3 times over without touching their retirement funds or investments. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't that they couldn't afford my surgery. They simply didn't want to pay for it. Is that true? I asked, looking directly at my father. He couldn't meet my eyes. It's more complicated than that. How? I demanded. How is it complicated? You have the money. You chose not to use it for my medical care. What am I missing? Mom stepped forward, wringing her hands. We've been saving for Madison's wedding since she was a little girl. She's always dreamed of a big wedding and we promised. And what about my dreams? I cut in. What about my promise to myself that I'd work hard, get an education, build a life? How am I supposed to do that when I can barely walk? We thought you'd figure something out, Dad said lamely. You've always been so resourceful, so independent. Independent doesn't mean abandoned, Grandpa snapped. It doesn't mean left to suffer when help is available but withheld. He turned back to my parents, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. I'm ashamed of you both. Truly ashamed. I thought I raised you better than this, Robert. Dad flinched as if he'd been struck. The surgery is happening, Grandpa continued. I've already spoken with the hospital's financial department. It's scheduled for tomorrow morning. I'm covering all costs, and I'm staying with Olivia throughout her recovery. We can help, Mom offered weakly. We want to help. Now you want to help? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. After Grandpa calls you out? After I collapse in public? What changed, Mom? The money was always there. She had no answer. I think you both should leave, Grandpa said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Dad drew himself up, a flash of the stubborn pride I'd inherited despite myself. You don't get to dismiss us from our daughter's hospital room. Actually, I interjected, I want you to leave too. I can't. I can't look at either of you right now without seeing Madison's BMW instead of my surgery. The hurt on their faces might have moved me once, but I was beyond that now. The pain medication was wearing off, and with its fading came a clarity that felt almost cruel in its sharpness. They left without further argument, Mom pausing at the door to look back with tears in her eyes. I turned my face away. When they were gone, Grandpa Samuel sat heavily in the chair beside my bed, suddenly looking every one of his 73 years. I should have known, he said quietly. I should have seen this coming. How could you have? I reached for his hand. I didn't tell you how bad it was. Because you shouldn't have had to, he replied, squeezing my fingers. This should never have happened, Livy. Never. In that moment, with my grandfather's hand warm around mine and the promise of help finally real, I allowed myself to cry for the first time since the car reveal, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from someplace I'd locked away long ago. Grandpa simply held my hand and let me cry, understanding that some wounds needed to bleed before they could begin to heal. The morning of the surgery arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Perhaps it was the certainty that help was finally here, or maybe it was the knowledge that regardless of what happened with my family, I wouldn't face it alone. Grandpa Samuel was there early, having spent the night in the hospital despite my insistence that he go to a hotel. He'd simply settled into the recliner in my room and waved away my concerns. "I've slept in worse places," he said, including a foxhole in Korea. "This chair is practically luxurious by comparison." The pre-surgical team came in to prepare me, checking vitals and explaining procedures. Dr. Mercer stopped by to review the surgical plan once more. "We'll reconstruct the ACL using a graft from your patellar tendon," he explained. "We'll also repair the meniscus damage and address the tibial plateau fracture with internal fixation. It's a complex procedure, but I'm confident we can achieve a good outcome." As they were about to wheel me to the operating room, my parents appeared in the doorway, looking uncertain. "Can we come in?" Mom asked tentatively. I glanced at Grandpa, who gave me a small nod. "Your choice, Livy." "Okay," I said after a moment. "But just for a minute. I'm heading to surgery soon." They entered cautiously, as if approaching a wounded animal that might either flee or attack. "We wanted to wish you good luck," Dad said stiffly. "And to say we're sorry." The apology hung in the air, insufficient but sincere. "We brought you something," Mom added, holding out a small gift bag. I took it reluctantly, peering inside to find a framed photo of me at my high school graduation, standing between my parents, all of us smiling. Before the injury, before everything changed. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "You don't have to say anything," Mom replied. We want you to know we're trying to understand what we did wrong." It wasn't enough, not nearly enough, but it was something. A crack in the wall of denial they'd built around their favoritism. "Thank you for coming," I said, neither accepting nor rejecting their tentative olive branch. The transport team arrived then, ready to take me to surgery. There was an awkward moment as my parents stepped back, clearly wanting to offer some physical gesture of support, but unsure if it would be welcome. Grandpa solved the dilemma by stepping forward and kissing my forehead. "I'll be right here when you wake up, kiddo. Everything's going to be okay now." I believed him. The surgery lasted nearly 4 hours. I remember nothing of it, of course, just the countdown from the anesthesiologist and then waking in the recovery room with a massive brace on my leg and a fog in my brain that made thinking feel like wading through molasses. True to his word, Grandpa Samuel was there when I fully regained consciousness in my hospital room. So were my parents, sitting quietly in the corner, and, surprisingly, Taylor, who must have driven back from campus. "Welcome back to the land of the living," Grandpa said warmly. "Dr. Mercer says the surgery went well. Better than expected, in fact." Taylor moved to my bedside, squeezing my hand. "You had us worried for a bit there. Your blood pressure dropped during the procedure, but they got it stabilized." "Sorry," I mumbled, still groggy. "Don't you dare apologize," Taylor scolded gently. "Just focus on getting better." The recovery process was grueling. 3 days in the hospital, followed by a week at Grandpa's house before I could return to my apartment near campus. Physical therapy began almost immediately, painful exercises designed to rebuild strength and mobility in my reconstructed knee. Grandpa was my rock throughout, driving me to appointments, making sure I took medications on schedule, and encouraging me when the pain made me want to quit. My parents hovered on the periphery, uncertain of their place in this new dynamic. They called daily, visited occasionally, always careful not to overstep. Their remorse seemed genuine, but the damage done wasn't something that could be erased with a few weeks of attentive behavior. The most surprising development came 3 weeks post-surgery, when Madison appeared at my apartment door unannounced. "Can I come in?" she asked, none of her usual confidence in evidence. I stepped back, leaning heavily on my crutches, and gestured for her to enter. She looked different somehow. Her designer clothes were replaced by simple jeans and a sweatshirt, and her perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Most noticeably, she'd arrived in an older model Honda, not the BMW. "I sold it," she said, following my glance out the window. "The car? What? Why?" Madison sat on the edge of my couch, hands twisting nervously in her lap. "After what happened at the hospital, after what Grandpa said to Mom and Dad, I couldn't keep it. It didn't feel right." I lowered myself carefully into an armchair, elevating my leg as the physical therapist had instructed. "I didn't ask you to sell your car, Madison." "I know you didn't," she replied quietly. "That's part of why I did it. You never ask for anything, Olivia. You never have. And I've always asked for everything." The admission stunned me into silence. "I knew," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "About the surgery, about Mom and Dad refusing to pay for it. I heard them talking about it the night before they told you no. And you still asked for the BMW?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I convinced myself it was different, that a car was a necessity and the surgery was optional. But I knew. Deep down, I knew it was wrong. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I need you to know that I see it now. The way they've always favored me, given me everything while expecting you to fend for yourself. It wasn't fair, and I was complicit in it." The honesty was unexpected and disarming. For years, I'd seen Madison as spoiled and self-centered, unaware of or unconcerned with the disparities in our treatment. The realization that she had been aware, that she'd chosen to ignore it for her own benefit, should have angered me. Instead, it sparked a strange sense of relief. At least now everything was in the open. "What did you do with the money from the car?" I asked. "I put most of it toward tuition. The rest I'm using to pay for therapy." "Therapy?" She nodded. "Turns out growing up as the golden child messes you up too, just differently. I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not being given everything I want." It was the most insightful thing I'd ever heard her say. Our conversation marked a turning point, not just with Madison, but with my parents as well. The facade of familial perfection had been shattered, forcing everyone to confront the unhealthy dynamics that had shaped our lives. Physical therapy continued, painful session after painful session. Some days I felt I was making progress. Other days the pain and frustration seemed insurmountable. But unlike before, I wasn't facing it alone. Grandpa came to every appointment he could. Taylor arranged her schedule to drive me when Grandpa couldn't. Even my parents, in their awkward, uncertain way, tried to help. 6 weeks post-surgery, I was able to put weight on my leg while using a single crutch. 8 weeks in, I walked unassisted for the first time, just across my living room and back, but it felt like crossing a finish line. "Look at you go," Grandpa cheered, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Didn't I tell you you'd beat this thing?" The physical recovery was measurable, trackable through degrees of motion and pain levels. The emotional recovery was messier, less linear. My parents suggested family therapy, a suggestion so unexpected I initially thought I'd misheard. "We've been talking to a counselor," Mom explained during one of their visits. "Separately, I mean. She thinks it might help if we all talked together with a professional mediator." "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Why now, after all these years?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Because we nearly lost you. Not physically, but we almost destroyed our relationship with you. And we don't want that." I agreed to try, not entirely convinced it would help, but willing to take the step if they were. The sessions were difficult, often ending with tears or tense silences. Years of resentment and favoritism couldn't be resolved in a few hours of guided conversation. But slowly, painfully, we began to build something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. And through it all, my knee healed, growing stronger as I learned to trust my body again, just as I cautiously learned to trust my family in this new, more honest configuration. 6 months after the surgery, I walked across campus without pain for the first time in nearly 2 years. The freedom of movement, something I'd once taken for granted, now felt like a miracle. I could climb stairs without wincing, sit through classes without shifting constantly to alleviate pressure, even join Taylor for short walks around the lake that bordered the eastern edge of campus. I wasn't back to my pre-injury capability. Dr. Mercer had been clear that some limitations would likely be permanent. No more competitive sports, a lifetime of careful maintenance exercises, and probable arthritis in the distant future. But compared to the life of chronic pain and progressive disability I'd been facing, these constraints seemed minor. On a crisp autumn afternoon, I met Grandpa Samuel at our favorite coffee shop, the same one where I'd collapsed half a year earlier. The staff greeted me warmly, several asking about my recovery. "You look good, Livy," Grandpa said as we settled at a corner table with our drinks. "Strong. I feel strong," I admitted. "Not just physically." He nodded, understanding as always. "Adversity reveals character, yours and others. You've learned that lesson earlier than most." "I wanted to thank you again," I said, wrapping my hands around my mug. "Not just for the surgery, but for everything. For seeing me when I felt invisible." Grandpa reached across the table and patted my hand. "You were never invisible to me. From the day you were born, I saw something special in you. A resilience, a determination that reminded me of myself." He took a sip of his coffee, then set the mug down deliberately. "There's something I want to tell you. I've made some changes to my will." "Grandpa, you don't have to." He held up a hand. "Let me finish. This isn't about the money, though that's part of it. It's about protection. I've established a trust for you that your parents cannot access or control. It will provide for your education and any future medical needs related to your injury." I started to protest again, but he continued. "I've done the same for Madison, before you ask. But hers is structured differently, with specific conditions to encourage responsibility and independence. The point is, I want you both to be secure, but I don't want either of you to be vulnerable to the kind of situation you faced this past year." The depth of his thoughtfulness moved me deeply. He hadn't just solved the immediate crisis, he'd taken steps to prevent future ones. "Thank you," I said simply, knowing he would understand all that those 2 words encompassed. The family therapy sessions continued, sometimes productive, sometimes frustrating. My parents struggled to acknowledge patterns so deeply ingrained they'd become invisible to them. Madison oscillated between defensive justification and remorseful guilt. I vacillated between anger and the desire to forge a healthier relationship. Progress came in small moments, Dad calling to ask about my physical therapy instead of just assuming I was fine. Mom acknowledging that she'd always expected more from me because you seemed so capable. Madison asking for advice instead of attention. During one particularly difficult session, our therapist, Dr. Levine, asked us each to express what we wanted from our family relationships moving forward. "Boundaries," I said without hesitation. "Respect for my independence, but support when I actually ask for it. And equality, not just in material things, but in expectations and attention." "That seems reasonable," Dr. Levine observed. "Robert, Diana, how do you respond to that?" My parents exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "It's fair," Dad finally said. "More than fair, considering everything. We haven't been equitable parents, and we need to do better." Mom nodded, tears in her eyes. "I want a relationship with both my daughters. Real relationships, not based on roles we've assigned or expectations we've created." Madison's answer surprised me most. "I want us to be honest with each other. Even when it's hard. Maybe especially then." Setting boundaries wasn't easy. There were missteps and backsliding, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves. But the difference now was that we recognized them when they happened, named them, and tried to correct course. One unexpected outcome of my experience was the creation of a support group for students dealing with family favoritism and its effects. What began as casual conversations with classmates who'd experienced similar dynamics grew into weekly meetings in the student union building. 20 students at first, then 30, then more. I never realized how common it was, I told Taylor after one particularly emotional session. So many people carrying these invisible wounds. And now they have somewhere to talk about it, she pointed out. You did that, Liv. You turned your pain into something helpful for others. The perspective shift was profound. For so long, I'd seen myself as a victim of my family's dysfunction. Now I was using that experience to help others navigate their own complex family relationships. Even Madison attended occasionally, offering the rare and valuable perspective of the favored child who was working to understand the damage that preference had caused. I think about all the times I took advantage, she admitted during one meeting. All the times I knew what I was asking for wasn't fair to my sister, but I asked anyway because I knew I'd get it. That's on me, not just my parents. Her honesty earned her respect from the group and from me. Our relationship, once defined by resentment and competition, was evolving into something more balanced, more authentic. My parents sold their house that fall, downsizing to a smaller home closer to Grandpa. The decision surprised me until Mom explained their reasoning. We don't need all that space anymore, and the equity will help us fix some of our financial priorities, she said. We've been thinking a lot about what really matters. What went unsaid but understood was that the house had been part of the problem, a showcase for success rather than a home built on love and equity. As winter approached, bringing with it the one-year anniversary of the confrontation over Madison's car, I found myself reflecting on everything that had changed. The physical pain that had dominated my existence was now manageable, flaring occasionally but no longer constant. The emotional pain had transformed too, not gone but different, more like a healing scar than an open wound. I'd learned lessons I never wanted to learn. That family can hurt you in ways strangers never could, that love is not always expressed equally or fairly, that sometimes you have to fight for what should be freely given. But I'd also learned that it's possible to rebuild what's broken, that people can change when confronted with the consequences of their actions, that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, but can exist alongside clear boundaries and new expectations. Most importantly, I'd discovered my own worth wasn't determined by my parents' validation or recognition. It existed independently, recognized by those who truly saw me, Grandpa Samuel, Taylor, the students in my support group who drew strength from my story. On a snowy December evening, I sat in Grandpa's living room, watching him tend the fire while my parents and Madison helped prepare dinner in the kitchen. The scene was ordinary, domestic, yet it represented an extraordinary transformation from where we'd been a year ago. "Penny for your thoughts," Grandpa said, noticing my contemplative expression. "I was just thinking about how much has changed," I replied. "And how much hasn't?" He nodded, understanding as always. "The people are the same, but the awareness is different. That's where healing begins." "Do you think we'll ever be completely healed?" "As a family, I mean." Grandpa considered the question carefully before answering. "I think healing isn't a destination, Livy. It's a practice. Some days you'll do it well, some days you won't. The important thing is that you keep trying." As we gathered around the table that evening, the conversation flowing more easily than it had in years, I realized he was right. We weren't a perfect family. We probably never would be. But we were learning to see each other clearly, to acknowledge hurts rather than ignore them, to make space for truth alongside love. And perhaps that's the most any family can aspire to, not perfection, but authenticity. Not flawlessness, but the courage to face our flaws and grow beyond them. My knee will always bear the scars of what happened, just as our family will always carry the history of favoritism and neglect. But scars are not just markers of past wounds. They're evidence of survival, of healing, of the body's remarkable capacity to repair itself. The same is true for the heart, for relationships, for families willing to do the difficult work of honest reckoning and genuine change. As I look toward the future now, I do so with neither resentment nor rose-colored optimism, but with a clear-eyed understanding that we build our lives one choice at a time, one conversation at a time, one boundary at a time. And in that building, we define for ourselves what family truly means. Have you ever experienced family favoritism or had to stand up for yourself when those who should support you didn't? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family challenges and finding your worth. Remember, sometimes the family we create through our choices is as important as the one we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you navigate your own path to healing.